in a really organic way, not necessarily the way that I have come into the craft. But one of the things that really struck me as interesting was that the use of all of the different products that come from the beehive was beyond what I had even imagined. And so now we have Google, and if you just Googled uses for honey, you would be shocked that it was used during war times to actually help in the help to cure or help to stop the spread of disease, because there were not necessarily antibiotics that were available. It is sterile, so that means that bacteria cannot grow in it. And then there are all of the other byproducts like propolis and royal jelly and bee pollen. And recently my parents gave me a bee pollen diffuser that helps to calm your senses and increase your immunity. So every day I'm learning something new. I think that when I finally got to the point where it went from being on a focus board and a bucket list to doing the research, I was pleasantly surprised to find resources in the DFW metro area. So every county may not have a beekeeping association, but most states do. I was fortunate enough to find a mentor and a teacher that offered a full course. And so shameless plug for Sabine Creek Honey Farm. They are a family-owned business and very passionate group of people who have taken time out to create a curriculum around beekeeping. So I just dove in. I called, I went to the website, signed up for the class, and dedicated several Saturdays to it. And because of that, I realized that I became even more passionate about the information behind it. But even if you don't have the time to commit to a full class, I think realizing our shared responsibility as inhabitants of this earth to be good to the ecosystem that's good to us, right? So it's probably three things, and Kara, I'll try to keep up with your lovely slides and not jump ahead. I just want to talk about our relationship, right? So our relationship with bees, here's a simple relationship to think about. We need oxygen, and plants give off oxygen, okay? Plants have to go through their natural state of being, creating chlorophyll and all of the things that help them to thrive. And many of the plants are not able to go through that pollination period without the assistance of pollinators, and bees are major pollinators. So they are able to take pollen and nectar and move them between plants in such a sophisticated way that we realize spring, we realize fall, we realize color changes, the blossoming of fruit and plants, and things that we really enjoy. And a little known fact, all of the almonds that are grown in the United States are mostly grown in California, and that process will not take place without bees. And so if we think about how our economy thrives, that's a major crop of the United States, and just our own consumption rate is pretty high, and the cost of it really never goes down. It's valued very high, and a portion of that is because the process is wholly dependent on bees. So I like to encourage people to think about, if we decide to remove bees out of the equation, we have essentially cut our food sources down quite a bit, to include if you still engage in eating, fleshy or animal-based products. Those animals are not able to continue in their life cycle, because more than not, they are all herbivores, so they have to have plant sources to eat. One of the things that I spoke with Kara about that I think is in keeping with this concept of doing our part, right? So we want to do our part. We love seeing the beauty and the splendor around us in nature, and I know many of us during this pandemic have either returned to or visited for the first time practices that are hopefully sustainable. And we had a little bit of a wake-up call early on in the quarantine process that people became panicked, and they bought a lot of the perishable foods or the non-perishable items off of the shelves. And really, if you think about extended amounts of time of not being able to go out and get fresh food, it it caused some of us to think about growing gardens, right? Whether they're just herb gardens or in pots, or I'll just start with tomatoes or lettuces. And it's a great thing. It is a great thing. So the natural progression to that, I think, is, what other things can we grab from nature, and the reminder that we want to kind of be a little bit more a part of our own life cycle, because grocery stores are actually not the starting point of our food. They are really far down the line from inception, meaning seeds going in the ground, to an actual plant. And I won't talk too much about that, but our food practices in the United States still need a lot of regulation, and that really can only come from the population of people that eat the food. So as far as bees, and we can go on to another slide if you like, Kara. So something that is interesting to know about bees is they are indicators for the health of our environment. And there were people who had a concept that they started to follow, and eventually it became it was given a name, which was called colony collapse disorder. And this was being studied back probably at least 20 years ago. And even before then, there had been studies. We started to see diminishing numbers of bees, and there were a lot of different theories of what was causing that. One of the theories was technology. We now have cell phone towers, and bees operate really off of their own GPS tracking systems. They have kind of like sonar, along with they are sending signals out. They are aware of their surroundings up to about 5 miles. And so if there are waves in the air that may misdirect them or break their connection with their hive, it can cause them to become disoriented. So seeing those numbers diminish, bees are linked together to their hive by their mother, which is the queen bee. So if you have hundreds of bees that are out foraging and they lose their way, then the rest of the hive is dependent on all of the foragers returning, and it will cause the hive to go into distress. So there were scientists that thought that this was pretty significant. The other thing was global warming, obviously changes in our climate. So you have plants that are, the need to pollinate doesn't change. The bees are aware of the pollination cycle. Because of the changes in extreme weather, the pollination cycles have been thrown off. So you may have an early spring somewhere, or you may have a very intense weather condition that shifts and causes the plants to not thrive for some reason, or to not bloom on time. And so all of these things have a domino effect, right? We see it in our pockets, because when El Nino hits, the cost of certain produce can fluctuate, and it can go up because it is not readily available in the market. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the hives themselves, right? And the positions and roles of the bees. So I find bees to be one of the most fascinating ecosystems that I've ever come into contact with. They are the lovers of the world. They are born to care for each other, and they are born to bring sweetness to all of us. They make honey as their main food source, and it is just a constant cycle of living and dying to create more food. And that food happens to be medicinal for humans in so many different ways. So the hive, and I've, again, in talking with Kara prior to this, it was amazing to me to find out that the roles within the hives themselves change as the bee is going through its very short life cycle. Bees only live like a couple of months. The queen is who outlives everyone. So again, I did mention that they are tied together by pheromones. They know their mother, they know their hive by the pheromones that they all carry, because they've all come from the same queen bee. And as they are going through the maturation process, their duties within the hive change, with the exception of the drones, which are technically the males, and the males of the hive are few and far between. And this is going to sound a little bit on the fringe of female empowerment. Bees are pretty much women. Beehives are all women. You have to be given a sex. They are women, but there is only one that produces the children, which is the queen bee, and the drones are the male bees that continue to impregnate the queen. And so the younger bees are taking care of the larvae. They have responsibility for cleaning the cells, so when you look at the honeycomb, there are cells that have a different color, and those are the cells that the babies are in. And so the responsibilities continue to grow. Like the teenagers start to kind of move out, and again, they'll have feeding responsibilities, cleaning responsibilities, security responsibilities. So when you go to a hive, there are a certain number of like warrior bees that are waiting to greet you, and also alert the hive for any type of intrusion or invaders. And then there's a whole group of young, strong bees that help moderate the temperature for the queen. So we are in Texas, and we have extreme temperatures for extended amounts of time. For the record, bees like moderate temperatures. They really do not like extreme heat, and if they are living in extreme heat, they typically need a water source. So if you look geographically in Texas, most of the honey comes from East Texas, and a lot of that has to do with their rainfall. They have more humidity and moisture, and they typically realize the seasons in maybe a little bit more of a balanced manner than the rest of Texas does. I'm from South Texas, San Antonio, so it is a lot hotter than Dallas for longer periods of time. So the magic of bees is that they have a wholly sustainable life that is tied to a group concept. So as a family, they thrive by everyone doing their part, and they live to work and they work to live. And so I think that from kind of what I extract from it from a spiritual standpoint is that we can learn a lot about civilizations or beings that choose to work in unison with each other, no matter how those numbers grow. Now, there is a cap. Even bees have a breaking point of there's just too many of us. And when they get to the point where their living quarters have become too uncomfortable, there's not enough space, the hive is too hot, the work is starting to become too intense because of their numbers, then their mother sends out the message that it's time to go. And they swarm. And you may or may not. This picture is a fantastic example of a naturally occurring hive that is, there are a lot of bees that are there, and you oftentimes will see the swarm. They may choose a tree to go to, and they may swarm again to find somewhere that offers more shelter, and sometimes it is your storage shed or an underhang in your house, or there are also ground bees. There are different varieties of bees, but honeybees will always find a place that they can go and build comb and create a home for themselves. And so going on, I guess, to another portion of the topic is, what do you need to even get started, right? These are beautiful planter boxes and sunflowers, and all of these plants are both perfect for beautifying. Most of them are very low maintenance plants, and they are excellent for pollinators, for bees. Sunflowers are also very medicinal. You can use several parts of the sunflower, like you see here, the drying. We all love sunflower seeds, and if you look them up, they have a decent amount of alkalinity as well as vitamins and that your body can use. So if you're a person that's thinking to yourself, okay, I live in the city, I like to keep bees. A lot of people are allergic to bees. I have planter boxes that are in my backyard. How would I go about doing this? Do I just put a couple of beehives out there? So the answer is yes and no. You can make the decision to be what's called a hobbyist, which is what I am. I don't use beekeeping as a means of making money. Hobbyists do do have the option of selling their honey if they choose to. That's not what I currently do. I mostly gift it, use it in recipes, and look to change people's minds about it. And so um, there are a couple of different types of beehives, and what you see here is one of the most common. It's called a Landstruck hive, and the construction of it is that it has one of the boxes, it's a brood box that's where the queen is mostly laying her eggs or creating the brood, and the other boxes have what are called standards or frames that are in them, and the frames, you can buy frames that are literally just the outline, and the bees can organically build their own, like this one that's pictured right here. The bees build their own honeycomb, or you can use frames that have kind of like a little grid on them. It's like a mold that it isn't harmful to them at all. It actually helps in the building of the cone because it is a surface for them to build on, as opposed to having gravity, because the weight of the honey will cause the cone to break naturally. And so this kind of contains it. I want to put a little bit of a public service announcement that beekeeping, it will get you into fantastic shape, because although those boxes are not really that heavy without any cone built on them, once there is cone and honey, one of those frames could weigh 3 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you may have 10 frames. So carrying one of the standards or one of the hive boxes can be quite a workout. I'd like to say in the summer that my forearms are a lot stronger than they are any other time of year. So what you see here is this gentleman has on a beekeeping suit, right? I have a couple of friends that are into motorcycles, and they said when they first went to take the class, the first thing that they were told was to spend more money on their protective gear than they did on their first motorcycle. I think that's pretty good advice for beekeeping. You can get kits that will have most of the things that you see here. So that hive tool is what this beekeeper has in their hands, and it is a metal tool that ends up being, it's like a multi-tool. You keep it for everything. You have this tool, you use it like it's pictured here to loosen up the frames. Naturally, the bees create propolis to seal their homes, and it is a very thick, tacky product that is similar to a glue. And the longer they are in the hives uninterrupted, meaning that we are not moving the frames out in and out of the hive, it will get to the point that it has become so tacky that you are not able to remove it without using a healthy amount of force, and you have to kind of carve it out with that metal tool. So again, going back to where you get started, if you Googled beekeeping, you could even go to Amazon. There are lists of everything, but this particular jumpsuit that is pictured here is one that also has the really long gloves, right? So the gloves are important because you are handling bees, and naturally if you are near their hive, like any other being or animal near your home, you want to protect yourself, right? So if someone is an intruder, you want to make sure that you let them know either they're welcomed or they're not welcomed. And bees, you can see this is one frame. That's probably easily 100 bees on one frame. So a hive could have in excess of several hundred bees, and they are at home. So when you come to knock, you want to be very gentle. And that is part of the practice that I've come to really enjoy. One part of it is just the idea that you have to create a very zen space for yourself. And I see someone put in the chat that David Beckham started beekeeping. Oh boy, he will make a lovely spokesmodel for beekeeping. Hopefully you all are inspired. Beautiful people beekeep. David Beckham is doing it. The practice of beekeeping is very humbling, and you really want to take yourself to a place of humility, because this is one of nature's majesties. These beings, again, exist in this small space, and they are producing something that is so rich and so, and I mean rich in terms of currency, because if you've ever seen the cost of honey, there's a reason why a pound of honey could cost you $12. The process that it takes, the patience that it takes, and I feel like I'm asking to be a part of their life and what it is that they do. So whenever I go to the space where the hives are, the first thing that I do is just kind of take a deep breath and I start talking to the bees. You know, I'm grateful that you're here. I see you're doing all this lovely work. I hope that there's plenty of what you need. They really only forage up to 2, maybe 3 miles from where their hive is located. And so when I'm entering the hive, it's with the most amount of respect and humility, for this is their space and their home, and they are hard at work, and they are always at work. So I know for me, if someone shows up to my job, even if I knew they were coming, I might be a little bit distracted, caught off guard. I might even ask you to wait a little while so I can finish up what I'm doing. Since they don't have union sanctioned breaks, you have to kind of get in where you fit in, and this brush is a very soft bristled tool that is used to move them off of the standard or off of the frame so that you're able to assess the frame itself. Something that I learned in my course that is suggested is that as soon as you get the queen, unless you're taking a hive that has been harvested or rescued, as I said, we're the ones that are being rescued. The bees are where they want to be. But unless you get an organically grown hive, then you should mark your queen, and they have there's some non-intrusive, it's almost like a little paint. She will appear to be different than everyone else in the hive. However, as you can see, there's hundreds of bees there. And so a queen bee has a longer body. You see this bee has been marked. I'm not sure how they pulled off having a number on her, but mine just had a little dot, and I chose bright green because it's my favorite color. Look, there's bright green. That's not my queen, but you mark her because each time you visit the hive, you really are checking on her health. You want to see where she's located in the hive, because that's an indicator as well of how productive she's being and laying more eggs, as well as how much honey is being built, whether the hive is being kept at a temperature that is pleasing to her. You may find that she's further down as it gets colder. She may be a little closer to the surface when it is warmer. And again, there are bees whose jobs it is to go and get water, and they're like swamp coolers. They just cool the hive. They actually move their wings to create airflow in the hive itself. So when you hear the buzzing, it isn't a signal for attack. Some of the buzzing is part of the work that they do to maintain the temperature of their home. So again, going back to the different tools, there was a smoker that was on there, and I loved the Disney movie that was all about the lives of bees, and it would show them all passing out when the smoke would come, that they were just like, it kind of looked like an opium den. Everyone was high and they passed out. The smoke does relax them, and I can't say it is like the cannabis for them, but I will say that it calms them and it takes them out of attack mode. So some hives can be more aggressive than others, and these are all things that you are looking at. Most bees are not naturally aggressive. There are species of bees that are more aggressive than others. I think it was probably at least now more than 20 years ago that the Africanized bee was introduced to North America through a very interesting migration, and likely was carried by a human. And because of that introduction, like any other species that gets introduced outside of its ecosystem, it creates a shake in the balance of that ecosystem. And once that species starts to integrate with the existing, it causes for other like strands, just like with food when we talk about genetically modified. Well, nature can do its own modifying as well. And so we do have bees that may have become more Africanized and they are more aggressive in nature. For the novice or the hobbyist, typically we get queens from certain regions that are very mild, they live long lives, and they are highly productive because that's what you want, a highly productive queen. And you'll see all of these things. So I know I've talked a lot, and I would love for anyone to ask questions about any of what I've said as far as the hives themselves, the equipment, how the bees engage with each other.
And Shafeeqa, I actually have a question. I was wondering, are there local sources of, where would you suggest people reach out to if they're interested? They can buy everything else on Amazon, but can you buy bees on an online platform, or what would you suggest?
You actually can. So my first suggestion would be find someone who can mentor you. And again, there is, I'm a member of the Collin County Beekeepers Association because I took the course with a long-time standing chair of that chapter, and it's encouraged that you join a group because it's like anything else you do, you need support. We need support in parenting, we need support in schooling, and so my suggestion would be get a mentor, and there are beekeeping supply locations. Most of them are at least an hour outside of Dallas proper, but so many things are online, and similar to if you were deciding to, say, purchase something for your household, you would want to look at quality. If it's something that's a one-time use, you may not mind just going to Walmart and getting, they do sell hoods, they sell a beekeeping jumpsuit. It's not as thick in quality or heaviness. They don't have the same leather gloves and those types of things. So there are places, do I have the information for the beekeeping class that I attended? Oh, good question. Yes, I will put it in the chat, absolutely. So yeah, I would suggest, Kara, that people consider going to specialty or novelty stores once you make the decision to beekeep, because it makes a difference, right? So I mentioned Sabine Creek Farms, Sabine Creek Honey Farm. I will put in the chat the link because they have classes that they offer. Again, it's in Royce, Texas. And what is nice about this particular group of beekeepers is they are also very much scientists and work for and lobbyists for the rights of ag, as well as helping to educate people.
We've had some other questions come in too. This person says, we noticed yellow jackets tend to disturb the bees. What can we do to keep this from happening, and what other species hurt bees?
I can't, but maybe it was just a connection. I wanted to mention too that, of course, we've been talking about the different flowers that can be brought in to help feed the bees. Also wanted to mention it does help with your vegetable garden as well. So things like cucumbers, different squashes, just like Shafeeqa said, there are different crops that are reliant on these pollinators. So we were actually kind of selfishly planting those zinnias and sunflowers at Mountain View campus of Dallas College to, of course, to support the bees, yeah, but also to bring them in, to be little worker bees and pollinate all of the vegetables that we had growing at the campus. So it goes both ways, you know, so you can support the bees even if you aren't taking care of a hive necessarily yourself, because they're just really helpful to have around to support your vegetable garden at home.
Absolutely. Are you all able to hear me again now?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that was the perfect lead in, and I see um, a couple of questions that have come in. I did want to mention my decision about urban beekeeping was made hugely because two things. One, I live in an urban setting. Okay, I was living literally in the middle of Dallas, and also having grown up on in an urban setting, which typically means that cities start at the center and they build out. So the oldest parts of the city are found closest to downtown, and much in the same way that people find real estate more attractive in the city center, we call it gentrification. There are mixed feelings on both sides of that argument. Part of what is attractive, aside from the construction of the homes, are the mature plants. And what is typically true is that many of the city centers are built like at the turn of the century. And at that point in time, we didn't do sophisticated landscaping. We were not bringing things in outside of what grew naturally in that ecosystem. And so what you'll find in modern day hoods is a lot of overgrowth, heavily forested and wooded areas, and naturally occurring indigenous plants. And that's important for, again, the life cycle of bees, because most people think about bee yards being out in rural areas, and that is okay if bees have a food source. And in Texas, a lot of our cash crops are not food sources for bees. So corn, a lot of corn is grown. It is air pollinating. It's not food for bees. Monoculture means that we have fields and fields of the same crop. And even with like soybeans or different types of greens, there's not enough variety for pollen and nectar for the bees to actually produce a honey that would be worth them eating or worth us eating. So the push to encourage people to consider urban beekeeping is really surrounding the idea that the food sources are closer and more abundant. So a hive would not have to go very far to find things like one of their favorites, poison ivy, or water sources, because sometimes in urban areas we have water that pools because of poor drainage. We have people with swimming pools. Bees really like swimming pools, by the way. They love bird baths. All of the things that create the convenience for them to thrive is pretty important. And so I wanted to put a plug in for that. There is regulation around, and I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds about the regulation. The state of Texas, and every state is able to decide how they treat bees. From a national standpoint, bees are considered to be livestock, so they are a part of agriculture. If you do have land, and I believe Texas requires that you have I think it's between at least a minimum of 3 acres to take advantage of the tax exemption that you get with the agricultural tax exception. And again, I would suggest that you look that up for yourself. If you do have land, it could be something that you can take advantage of. Now, there are some little small loopholes that have taken place recently surrounding that legislature. I don't know where it is now, other than you're required to maintain your agricultural status for a certain amount of time before you get the exemption. Why it's important, though, to know what the rules and the laws are is each county is different. Dallas County is not the same as Tarrant County, is not the same as Collin County. So you would want to make sure that you get that information for where you live. Simple rule of thumb is that although you may love bees, everyone else may not. So if you have a private residence, there are, again, rules. One of the rules is you need to put 8 feet of protection around the bees, and that is so that they're encouraged to, when they leave to forage, that they forage and they go up and out as opposed to evacuating the hive from the side, because you don't want a situation where someone feels attacked or they are attacked because that is a possibility, and it could just be that everyone is leaving the hive to go to work for the day, but the humans became panicked. And it is true what they say, bees are able to pick up on how we feel and what our energy is. And again, that it creates more of a practice for us to think about centering ourselves and really calming our focus before we engage with them. So I love that Kara talked about many of the foods that we eat. Again, that relationship is reciprocal. The bees need us, we need them, the food needs them, and we need the food. And so that circle of life is really a lot closer than many of us give rise to. Um, and so if this is something that you're considering, looking at this list right here, I didn't get to the table and the cinder blocks. That was a pretty simple way to set the hive up. It's important that the hive not sit on the ground because raccoons can be a little bit like, beehive terrorists. There are other kind of pests that they don't really want what's in the hive. They just kind of bother it. Knock it over, and of course, like everything else in nature, most animals do have some sense of danger. So the good news is that the bees, they have a bit of a reputation. There aren't very many bee robbing animals that get away with it. But you want to set them up too for moisture, to make sure that the wood is not rotting, to make sure that they don't become infested with various different other critters, to keep the health of the hive, and airflow, because it's really important that they have the proper amount of airflow in and out of the hive. So I would love to take some more questions.
Yeah, we have one question. How does your process change during the colder months, and how do the bees adapt to colder weather?
So again, the bees live in a perfectly well orchestrated ecosystem. And like other beings who are very tied into their instincts, their preparation for the cold months starts in the summer. Part of the reason why the harvesting of honey depends on where you live. I harvest the honey somewhere early July because we have a long summer. So the bees will technically have probably up into October and November to create more honey. Now, why is honey important? That's their food source, and you want to make sure that they have enough honey to continue to have more babies, to continue to make more honey. And it's very critical that the timing of the harvesting take place where there are still plants that are available for them to use as a source of pollen and nectar. So we have fall gardens, we have winter gardens, we have summer and fall plants, we have wildflowers. The beauty of living in Texas is that the grow season is so long because we have long days of sun and heat. They know once it gets cold, their behavior changes. They've actually increased the number of babies that they've had for heat purposes. They move the queen further down or to the middle of the hive. They huddle up to keep themselves warm. Foraging doesn't happen as long because it only happens during sunshine or during the light hours of the day. And as if you are thinking of being a hobbyist, there are things that you will do to help and check on the health of the hive. So the relationship changes in terms of frequency. You would likely go to do different types of checks, like to make sure that there aren't any parasites. So they do have some natural, think about it like ticks. They have some intruders that are attracted to them, just like dogs get fleas and ticks. Bees have their share of issues, and so you want to check to see if you have an issue with this in your hive. There are natural ways of doing it, which I feel more comfortable. You can use like cornstarch and literally just dust them, and you can see on their backs, you can actually see if they have been invaded. So the winter time is all about keeping the hive hydrated, keeping the hive safe, checking to make sure that the babies are being born without any type of pests, checking the health of the queen, making sure that she is warm enough, and possibly supplementing their diet. So there are things that you can do like pollen patties. You can just do sugar mixes, things that will help sustain the production of honey for them. Just keep in mind that the honey that they are producing at that point in time, though, is going to be less nutrient rich in terms of pollen and nectar because the sources for the sugar is not the same as it would be throughout the year, and they have less food sources. So that's kind of the difference, is once the winter time comes, there's more of hive maintenance. You want to keep people comfortable, and make sure that they are thriving, that they are naturally always in the process of preparing for what's next. That's what a bee's life is all about.
Another question.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say another question came in of how should we handle if a hive is in a place that we may not want it to be? How to relocate them?
Good question. You shouldn't. You should call a professional. So I have I've gotten a relationship with a few beekeepers that is their business. I have more interest in, and I have gone now to see what they call they either call it saving a wild hive or relocating a hive, or really we're saving the humans from the bees. They're doing what they want to do naturally. I would suggest that you not try to disturb a hive that has chosen a part of your home or somewhere to flourish, because for one, you would visually become overwhelmed. Most people are not able to maintain themselves when you see that many bees moving around. And I don't even mean coming at you. I just look at this picture. Again, this is just the top of the hive. When you take out another box and another frame, there are more bees. There are bees everywhere. So most of us cannot really wrap our brains around that and stay calm, you know. So the best thing is to call a professional, and that is a whole business and industry. It's hive removal.
And this particular person said they had a member from Collin County Beekeepers Association come to remove the hive in their attic.
And that's a good place to start. So most of the beekeeping associations have websites, and they have resources that are on there, and they usually have several people that are members that this is what they do. And think about it this way: once the hive gets relocated, it is likely being added somewhere where it can be cared for and continue to flourish. Sometimes the hives are split, and that's a tricky equation. Again, we don't want to play the higher force or guide, but when you have hives that are existing naturally and they have such great numbers of bees, if you invite them into an apartment like this beehive that we're looking at right here, the numbers make a difference, and you have to be very deliberate in how that happens because there is only one queen per hive. And so if you are looking to requeen a hive or you are looking to split a hive, everyone has to accept their new mother. And if that doesn't happen, then you will not have a thriving hive. And so those are all considerations as well.
Thank you, Shafeeqa. I have a question. You made the comment about people saying that they should spend more on their beekeeping outfit than they do on their motorcycle. Can you give us just a ballpark on how much that is?
I want to say that I maybe spent, I think it was maybe $100. I probably should look. Again, if you are going to have a hive, you really want to make sure that your beekeeping coveralls are fit to you. I'm a very tall person, and so I wanted to make sure that I was being fit in something that would cover my arms and my legs all the way down to my shoes, and I typically make sure I kind of tuck in. Some of them have elastic around the closures so that you're just trying to keep the bees out because they will get in. and if they do get in, they become panicked. So you're likely to be stung. If a bee gets into your clothes, they're not stinging you because they're upset at you. They're stinging you because they feel trapped. So let me see what my beekeeping suit ran. And again, if you go to like a store that has those supplies, then what you'll find is that you can usually get things kind of like bundled. You're able to get, you're able to get the full jumpsuit, and you can get your gloves, and you can get everything that you need in that one place. So I just pulled up, Walmart has one that's $38.59, and Humblebee USA has one that's $169. So, they can range from a very low end to a very high end. Again, I think it matters what your comfort level is. I mean, initially when I was taking the class, I would never go out without being completely covered, gloves and everything, because you have to get to a point where this is a relationship, and it's early on in the relationship. No one knows each other, and you don't have a familiarity with even what to expect. So start by just going to see bees. That's a good first place, and see what your natural reaction is. For some people, as soon as a bee starts to fly, they start to swat, and that's probably not the reaction you want if you're thinking about keeping bees for yourself, because, well, when that happens, they will probably have a reaction too. So, does anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
You also mentioned that, some people seem to have more of an affinity for bees, and bees have more of an affinity for them. And so I'm just curious about this idea of a bee charmer. Have you ever met anybody who is a bee charmer?
Well, I definitely think that that my mentor, I mean, he's a very calm speaking person. I don't know if there's a correlation between your temperament and your voice, but my great uncle was like that. Uncle LaSalle was a very peaceful man. He always looked, he had a smile on his face. He never raised his voice. So there may be something to it. And he even told me that he had been stung several times. And I've heard this from several beekeepers, as ironic as it sounds, you actually would look forward to being stung over your lifetime, because what you build up in antibodies from the bee stings themselves is supposedly helps improve your overall health and immunity. And so I'm sure that there are people that just naturally have a temperament. I spent my whole childhood always having bees land on me, and a lot of it is hair products or skin products. My parents would have us smelling quite lovely in all types of natural essential oils and things, and the bees are attracted to those smells. Like, I always liked the smell of flower type oils like gardenia and lavenders, and bees like that too. So they kind of come to see you. So a lot of times people freak out because they've landed in their hair, or they've landed on their arm or their back, and they're sensing the smell of the nectar of those flowers in most cases, or those plants.
Okay, thank you. And I see Kara is advancing the slides, but we have one more question.
Well, I was just going to mention it would be great if we could get through the very last part, because we're already almost at time. I really want to hear about harvesting the honey. So.
Okay, yeah. Okay, sure. So what you're looking at right now is actually at Sabine Creek. This is their honey house, and they are, and I want to make sure everyone understands, they are a major producer of honey in Texas. So this is a very industrial looking operation. Kira had some earlier slides that show a more basic system. And so that small drum right there is probably more similar to what someone would have in their house. Old school, right there. You can you could create this yourself if you see someone use PVC pipe. All that we're using is just centrifugal force, spinning the actual frames around and allowing gravity to pull the honey out, okay? Those drums are spinning at a much higher rate with more consistency and airflow. And so if you only had a hive or two, this would be a very simple way you get all of the frames that you are choosing to harvest honey from. There's a picture of me with this roller though, and it's kind of like a soft, it's a textured brush, and I would say that they're not harsh like needles, but it's a really hard form. And all that I'm doing is loosening up and taking the cap off. That's all capped honey, and that lets you know that that honey is ready. It has the highest potency, and it has the proper amount of moisture and pH. And so just rolling that off allows the honey to flow a lot easier. And so that was kind of like the first step. So when you get to the honey house, you have to take and place all of your standards somewhere. I used a bucket, like the Rubbermaid tubs that you would get maybe to put sporting equipment in, or to put all of your winter clothes in. It's a pretty large size bucket, and just know that you cannot control honey. You're going to have honey spilling all over the place. But once you put it in there and it spins down, you also are checking, again, you check for the moisture content that is in the honey, because there's like a sweet spot that you want. And I am happy to say that my honey was pretty right on point. It was right in the middle of what that standard is, and everything else again is just gravity. So once you open up that cap, the honey starts to flow. Just the weight of it and the pressure of it allows it to push through. It's really not very sophisticated. This honey has not been strained at all, so you'll have particles and pieces, and as you can see, that's kind of similar to a strainer you may use in your kitchen, right? And so it's just being double strained to make sure that you're not getting pieces of honeycomb. Sometimes there's bees in there, that didn't get cleaned out of the hive, and they passed away. They actually clean the hive daily, but there'll be just pieces and particles that are in there. It's really kind of a short process. The cleanup is longer than the harvesting. Getting the actual frames, because they're so heavy, is longer than the process of the harvesting. You're talking about maybe, I would say, 10 or 15 minutes of just allowing it to spin and everything to just drain is the longer part. But it's an amazing experience. What was the other question?
Last question, or last two questions. How many feet above ground should the box be? That's one. And then also, how can we keep yellow jackets and other predatory species from invading their space?
Okay, so it's roughly about 1.5 feet, probably about 18 inches as a minimum. If it gets higher, then you have concern of like elements, the wind carrying it, knocking it over. But about 18 inches keeps it from being in harm for like rodents and things like that, or the moisture and mold. As far as yellow jackets things, believe it or not, again, the balance of nature, those two groups don't really exist next to each other naturally. So yellow jackets are not going to build their hive right next to bees. Now, if you just happen to put your hives maybe on top of something, it's a workbench, and there are, wasp or something that built a hive there, it won't take long before someone knocks someone else out. And just by sheer numbers, there are typically more bees in a hive than there are yellow jackets or wasp. So there's a lesser consideration, even though it seems like they would just like battle it out. That's not really what they do in nature, unless there is something that's created that opportunity for them to collide.
Thank you.